this series, we've introduced you to some of the greats of 20th century Scottish mountaineering. Colley, Rayburn, Murray and Patey. But in these modern days, with better equipment and a growing degree of professionalism, and indeed many more climbers invading the Scottish hills and putting up a lot more routes, it becomes increasingly difficult to select one name and say he is the superstar of the 90s. What we have is an elite group of climbers, very much at the sharp end of the sport, going out and searching out and finding new routes, often in difficult conditions like this.
Okay, Rob.
Okay,
Tricky bit coming up.
Setting the standards today are a new breed of highly technical climbers like Rab Anderson, Graham Ettle and Dave Cuthbertson, all of them totally committed to their sport.
To achieve what I've achieved in climbing, I have to be self-centered, without a doubt. I have to make everything fit to suit my climbing. Yes, it does affect your life. It can affect relationships, it can affect jobs. I try and not let my climbing run my life. I would say that I spend most of my time trying to keep on top of it. But underneath, the climbing is almost virtually dictating the way I run my life.
And this is the life he leads. 2,500 feet up Ben Nevis on Trident Buttress, Dave is about to climb Mega Route X, the almost vertical ascent of a 350-foot frozen waterfall. First climbed 10 years ago, it's a very demanding route.
Look how that looks from below. Ice isn't too bad though. Oh, that's good. Oh, but it's not going to be like that all the way up.
Oh, we don't that for me.
Eh?
We don't that for me.
It doesn't matter about you, does it? You're on the other end of the rope.
To begin with, I actually found climbing quite scary, quite intimidating. And in fact, some of the people I went away with, who were also beginners, were a lot better than I was, and I didn't feel at all that I had a natural flair.
You like it? Ice isn't too bad though. Well, spoke too soon there.
Something inside me anyway had some sort of driving force, a competitive element, and a wanting, a determination to get better. I actually wanted to be the best climber in Scotland.
Oh, that's our plate.
Yeah. I knew that was going to come off. Good heavy.
Doing no bad for a wee fella.
Eh?
Doing no bad for a wee fella.
Not bad for a wee fella.
I wanted to stretch myself. I set a standard, and I wanted to achieve that standard, and that standard bettered what had been done before. But I also wanted to be better. I wanted to be the best.
You're nearly up to that big hole. You get a peg in there somewhere.
Peg?
Aye.
There's no peg here. Might be able to get a nice screw in.
Does it look like Cubby?
Eh?
What does it look like? You get something in that hole, Cubby?
Sorry?
You get something in that hole?
Well, I can see some cracks, but I think they're too blind to take pegs, so I'm going to put a nice screw into the right here.
Certainly I've had to endure, I would say, considerable hardship financially. Having to hitch, having to sleep out, not eating properly. Certainly in relationships, it doesn't make life easy unless you have a very understanding wife or girlfriend.
Seems quite good, Paul.
Good.
A little bit slack.
The quality of the ice that the Ben generates is very pleasing to climb on. It's very aesthetic. It's a beautiful mountain seamed with gullies and faces, ridges, arêtes, and nearly all of the rock gets covered in ice, providing an almost infinite variety of situations. Techniques for a route like Mega Route X involve two ice axes, one of which has to have a hammerhead so that you can bang in ice screws which will be used to protect your ascent. Both of the picks of the axes have to be extremely sharp so that they penetrate the ice without any real problem. It's quite important that you get first-time placements. It also is equally important that your crampon points are very sharp so that they also penetrate the ice in the same way that the picks of the axes do. The approach that ice climbing dictates is generally a very bold one. The greater capacity that you have to switch off and intend to go for it is usually the order of the day.
In making these difficult climbs, Dave doesn't wait for perfect weather. There isn't much of that on Ben Nevis. But after 20 years in these mountains, he knows what he can get away with.
I think this bit's probably the crux of the route. It looks steep and quite sustained, so just keep your eye out.
Mega Route X is basically hard, brittle water ice. It's not particularly high, it's about 350 feet, but quite precarious.
Just watch Paul, big bit of ice here.
It relies heavily on the temperature. If it's too warm, then the ice could melt and detach itself from the rock. If it's too cold, it can become very brittle, which makes placements for the ice axes extremely arduous to find, and therefore the actual ascent of the climb can be very, very strenuous. I have been very scared in climbing.
Nice placement, that one.
I would say that I actually experimented in my 20s in one way or another with taking climbing technically as far as I think I could. And I sort of played around a wee bit with trying to maintain a cool head, as it were, and knowing when and when not to just kind of push myself into overdrive. And on some of my hardest climbs, where I took my ideas to their absolute limit, I did in fact go into the red and managed to get away with it.
They're always longer than they look, these things. What's that? Less time. More time on this stuff. Let's have a little breather. Back to the Nevis here. I'm back on the Nevis. What? Aye, I always was a Nevis man. Aye. I can see the belay, it's only about 30 feet above. I might just place a runner here actually.
I made a conscious early decision when I was still at school, at a time when I was doing my O-levels, and realised then I could either commit myself to going to college, but I thought a life in climbing was the route that I wanted to follow, and decided just to pack it all in and completely went for climbing.
Watch below.
I don't regret it to this day.
50 miles away in the northern corries of the Cairngorms, Rab Anderson and Graham Mettle set out to climb the appropriately named White Magic, in what is little better than a blizzard. If asked, they'd say they were driven to it.
I think you have to want to do the route for a start. And you've got to be quite determined and know that you're going to have to push, because the thing's covered in snow. You can perhaps see the crack isn't fully covered in snow, but you've got to get to it. So you think of it in stages, and I tend to look at that and you think, right, okay, there's a first pitch. You sort out the description for the first pitch, you stand at the bottom, you look at it, and you think, well, okay, I'll go there, I might get some protection there, and you work out in your mind's eye what you actually want to do, and then you just get on with it, and you take every little 5-foot section as it comes.
I get out on the hill and possibly go up to these big cliffs that a lot of people might think are quite foreboding, but it's no different than somebody going out for a pleasant hill walk in the Lake District on a January afternoon, just a few hundred yards from the car. It's just, I've just taken it and progressed a little bit further than they have.
Okay, Graham, that's a good runner in.
It's Rab Anderson that is leading the first pitch.
It's difficult to work 5 days a week and then climb, but having said that, I did at one point do some guiding, and I packed in a job in the civil service and spent 2, perhaps 3 years where I was unemployed and trying to climb all the time. And back in those pretty early days, it was hard, and I didn't have money to go climbing, and we used to hitchhike places. And I actually found that when I did settle down and get a job, I was more focused.
I'll just run out to the top of this, Graham, is that okay? Pardon? Is that okay if I just run out to the top of this?
If I didn't actually climb at the weekend, essentially I had the attitude that I had wasted 5 days of my life if I actually hadn't gone out and done some climbing.
This is known as mixed climbing, a combination of rock, ice and frozen turf. And in these conditions, on as exacting a route as White Magic, it requires both ingenuity and a technique called torquing.
Torquing essentially is just using your ice axes as extensions to your hands and then applying sideways pressure which locks the blade in place. Sometimes you'll feel the pick bend in the crack as you apply that pressure. Now, as soon as you start to move up on perhaps dodgy crampon placements, then it becomes harder to maintain that sideways pressure on the ice axe. And at that point, you have to then reach above and place the next one in the crack. And once you've got pressure on that one, sometimes in a crossed over position, you may have to take the bottom one out and then put it immediately back in the crack. So, I mean, to make one torque move can be quite straightforward, but to do 2 or 3 torque moves in a row suddenly becomes a lot harder.
Watch me on yellow. Very precarious, Graham, just watch.
White Magic is never easy to climb. It's one of the toughest routes in the Cairngorms, and 2 days ago, on safety grounds, we had to abandon it. Now, in better weather, the climbers pick up where they left off.
That's it, good to go. Bit of slack on yellow, just a touch. I'll just get something in here. Aye. I'm on just and no more. Right, I've clipped into the belay. See him shuffle along a bit. Back on yellow. Whew. It's a bit tricky. All nice and slabby here. There's a little spike here. I don't know whether my hands will hold it, so just watch me on orange.
I get frightened quite a lot. I'm not saying I like it. I like to be in control, but it sometimes is the case when you've pushed it out 15 feet above protection, having made some reasonably hard moves, and then suddenly find that the foot ledge you want to stand on is not as good as you thought it might be, and the protection doesn't come to hand fairly quickly, and yeah, you get frightened.
Right, I've got something that might just hold. So just watch me an orange. Just watch while I tap this in, Graham. I might pop off.
Oh, you bastard!
That was one in the head.
No, that'll be alright, I'll put it back in.
Okay, Graham, that's good. I'll just get a draw in and step down.
Just with these hanging stances, you're better if they're backed up. Okay, that's alright, that'll back it up. I'll be with you in a few ticks.
Okay, Graham, that's me in.
Okay.
There can be few better settings for the drama of winter climbing than in the vast amphitheatre of the Northern Corries. Here there are more than 40 climbs, many of which have been put up in the last 10 years as the search for new routes intensifies in a sport which, at its leading edge, is highly competitive. White Magic was first climbed in 1985. Since then, there have been only 2 ascents. Winter climbers have always graded the routes, and on a scale of severity from 1 to 8, White Magic is grade 7. It's a 2-pitch climb on Aladdin's buttress, and the higher you get, the harder it becomes. The second pitch is up a finger crack that's only inches wide. Our climbers like this. For Graham Ettle, it has novelty value.
It's completely different to the sort of standard believed perception of traditional winter climbing. It's not an ice route in any way. It's not in a gully system. It's not particularly long either, but it's unique as in it's a single feature crack up a wall, and it's a delight to climb.
Choked with ice.
Is it? That's a shame. That'll make it harder for gear. Yeah, I don't like the cracks from the 2 ice myself. Yeah.
Right, you got slack on orange.
Got it?
Good.
Yeah, okay, take her in there. Cheers.
I've got you. That's it.
Right, I don't know what that's in.
Yeah, it's okay.
Can I lay back on it?
Without crampons and the modern ice axe, climbs like this wouldn't be possible. Every bit of equipment is now high-tech.
The crampon point wants to be as short as possible and as stubby as possible, just to alleviate the amount of leverage you have on your calves. I mean, I have 5 or 6 pairs of crampons all in use at some point during the winter. For me, my gear's fairly specific. It has to do its job well. Most of the gear has to last fairly well as well, so a lot of the kit I've got is fairly robust. Also, because I don't have a great deal of money, the gear sometimes can look a bit shoddy, and a lot of other people with more money may go out and replace it every year. I can't afford to do that.
I'm good. Brackaroonie. Rock 6, where are you? Oh, good one, that one.
It's nice when they go in.
Those footholds are getting a bit smaller, Rav.
Oh, well, you got short enough crampons for them.
Certainly have. Hope so, anyway.
My motivation for climbing, it's hard to say where it's from. I've certainly not come from a climbing family or background. It's something I was introduced to, like saying 10 or 12 years ago, and it's just gone from strength to strength. It's probably the only thing that I've had in my life that's I've found that I get a great deal of pleasure out of. What motivates me, I don't actually know, really. I think I'm probably just mad.
When the going gets tough on an ascent like this, climbers need more than good technique. Route planning, physical fitness, and a single-minded determination to succeed count for just as much.
Climbing is a very, very selfish game. You have to devote a lot of your, well, virtually all your time and energy focusing in on your next route or your various plans for routes you're going to do. It takes up all your spare time, and it will get very much in the way of relationships and also friendships. As you get better and your experience increases, you want to climb more and harder, and you begin to sort of pick up bits and pieces about harder routes, and the want to do them is always there. I think climbing is a very, very personal thing. I don't know whether that's true for other sports, because I haven't functioned that well at other sports to know, but there's a great deal of personal satisfaction out of just climbing, and the need for recognition from other people isn't too great. I get a great buzz out of just doing it for myself.
White magic isn't beaten yet. There is only one move left, but how to make it without an obvious handhold? The answer is to improvise.